We come into this world afraid, every single one of us. We release ourselves from this warm environment and we go into this world of bright lights and sterile hands. But I think that fear is a part of everyone's experience. Some people cling on to structures of ghosts, of echoes in lives past to avoid it. Some people face it head on, but ultimately it's something we all have to deal with. We're going to do this one. I feel like I just need to talk about stuff maybe. I think today I want to talk about fear. Fear is like, I don't know, it's been something I've been dealing with for the past about a year or so, I think. For my whole life, to be honest. But I feel like this past year I've been really confronting it head on. And I feel like I have a few lessons to share. So to give some background, I graduated college and then I wrote my first book. I moved away to a different country and, now I'm trying to publish a book. All of these experiences are terribly terrifying. And yeah, I've just noticed that the more I face fear, the more I just do it, just go for the things that I want, even if they scare me. I usually feel better after, at the end of the day. I don't, sometimes it doesn't work out, and a lot of the times it doesn't work out. But I've noticed how much more secure I feel in myself. Because I feel like fear is three different things. It can root back to three different things. I think that, sorry, I have allergies today. I think that fear can root back to rejection, it can root back to failure, and it could root back to fear of death, right? And all of these things are, I've noticed, you have to be comfortable with all of these things just living as a person, right? Failure, that's an inevitable part of any human experience. And I think that we all kind of know the lesson that comes with failure, right? Failure helps you learn, it helps you redirect. Failure is the most useful thing you can have as a creative person or just a person in general, right? Even if you're not creative, it just helps you redirect because failure, you learn so much more from doing something wrong. At least in my experience, it's been that way. I've learned so much more. Even if, okay, I'm in a different country, I'm speaking Spanish every day and I make so many mistakes. It's actually insane. But with every mistake I make, I get more fluent, I get better, and I get more confident in my abilities. And so now I can probably talk to anyone on the street. Now they may be like, what is he saying? Or he sounds insane. But I think it's important to keep practicing and keep failing because eventually things will start to click and they start to feel like they're coming into place. But if you don't fail, you won't get to the point where you have all this knowledge and you know what works and what doesn't work. It's like you're getting the full grasp of everything that you're pursuing, right? It's like if you were to see it as a bucket or maybe a tunnel or something, I don't know, but consider a huge circle, right? And if you're going on one path, you're only passing through the circle in a certain dimension and you're only looking forward. You only really get to see from the beginning to the end. But if you fail, you're bouncing off around all of the walls. You get the full grasp of everything in this world that you're pursuing or this field that you're pursuing or this goal that you have. You're getting to know every single thing about it. And I think that in itself is really such a cool thing because you also have a responsibility to pass down knowledge to others. Whatever you're pursuing, right? You have a responsibility to other people in your field, other people in your community. You have to pass the knowledge. So I think maybe see it as you're actually just learning so many more things about what you're supposed to be doing. And failure doesn't immediately mean give up on all your goals, give up on everything. It just means a different approach, try a different angle. So you bounce off of every single part of the circle in your goal, I guess. And then eventually you'll find the opening on the other side and you'll get where you're supposed to go. Or maybe after you bounced around the whole circle, you realize, I don't even like this circle, but now I know so much about it and I can help someone who maybe wants this for themselves or maybe, I know so much more about me just in myself as a human being, aside from my goals, and that in itself is super valuable, and so you go to another thing, or you find your pathway through and you get to, succeed or do whatever you're meant to do. And so I think that's really important. I think that failure is such a valuable thing. And I used to be so afraid of it for a while because I had this idea that I had to be like the most perfect person ever. And I think that kind of roots back to like a lot of childhood things, as does everyone's problems. But I think that for myself, I felt like I needed to be perfect. I needed to perform almost like to I felt like I was kind of this like showman almost, and I was like, look at me, I'm on stage, and look at all these amazing things that I've done, and I seem like I had no flaws, and all these types of things. And then eventually it caught up to me around last year, like before I graduated, and I kind of had a everything fall apart moment, not in the sense of like my actual reality, but my internal reality. It's like this, I can't carry on like this anymore. And so, realizing, I think everyone gets to a point eventually. I just hit mine pretty early. And I was like, why do I even care, about being perfect, right? Anyone that I actually like in the world is deeply flawed in a lot of ways. The characters I love in books are the ones that are complicated. They're not the ones that are perfectly in line. And so why can't I give that to myself? And I'm definitely not all the way there yet. I'm still very critical of who I am, but I like sometimes use this to remind myself like, okay, like just use media or books for example, right? The characters you love the most are usually the ones that are kind of fucked up or like kind of, you know what I mean? Just they have some deep flaw within themselves, or they have a certain insecurity, or they have a blah 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 blah, or they're failing and failing and failing, right? You tend to love those people. And we could even bring it back to kids, right? I think that now that I've been working with kids, right? Like I'm an English teacher now. I've noticed that I'm like, I'm not ever going to be mad at these kids for messing up. You know what I mean? Like, I think they're fucking awesome little balls of light. And, they're more charming with their faults, right? The kids that have mucus down their face, it's like adorable, or they're like falling over, or they're just saying the wrong things or being silly. Like, all of these things are super lovable parts of them. You know what I mean? Like, all of these wonderful qualities of them messing up, figuring out the world, falling over, stumbling. I think those are like the qualities that I found. I'm like, wow, like kids are really cool, and I actually don't judge them at all for making mistakes. If anything, that makes them better to me. I don't know if that's coming out right, but it's it's the same thing, and so it's like something now that I'm trying to apply to myself, right? Oh, wait, I'm also a person just like this child, and I also can fall over and make mistakes, and that makes me charming. That can make me lovable. These don't make me terrible or horrible. And if anything, it makes me more real, And I don't know. I love that. And so I think that's the biggest thing. It's like the fear of failure, right? A tactic that helps me is view yourself maybe as a book character or a kid or whatever helps you, right? Like a person in your life that you love unconditionally. And kind of see yourself as that, right? And I don't know. That's something that's helped me. And then, okay, so I think the other one was so fear of judgment, right? This could also be rejection, but I'll just say judgment. I think this one's a really hard one because I think we as humans are naturally dependent on other people's ideas or other people's feelings of us, right, to survive, right? And it was more intense, right, when we were foraging and, eating rocks and shit. But you know what I mean? Like there is this like, oh, there is this internal where you want to have these human connections, and human connection is so important, right? It's what gives us meaning. But it's finding the balance, right? Fear of rejection, because I think that you have to just reframe it in general, right? Don't fear, I guess, like, there's this one line of thinking that's like, don't care what anybody else thinks, you know, F them all, who cares, who cares? And I think, yes, don't care what people think to a degree, but I also do think that, don't view it as like, I am all alone on this journey, right? More just view it as like, there is a plethora of options of people that I can talk to and hang out with and, make friendships with or have deep connections. and you're just I see it like maybe as a buffet, which is kind of maybe a bad analogy, but it's like you're perusing, right? And so if something doesn't feel right, something doesn't taste right, you know, you don't like it, or you're feeling judged, then leave and then go try to find another group, right? Try to find these other things. And so it's like fear of rejection that like holds us back from doing what we want or acting how we want. No, just act how you want, and talk with the people that are in your life, see if they can understand where you're coming from, right? Have those deeper conversations with them and tell them this is why I like this, and all of these types of things. And then if they can't respect it, and then if they can't handle it, or you can't make a compromise, then yeah, leave and then go to another group of people or go to another person. And it's hard to let go of social connections, but at the end of the day in this life, you by yourself, yes, we have other people to reflect ourselves back off of, but in the end of the day, this is your life, your journey, and you have to ultimately make the choice to learn about yourself, because I think, in my own personal opinion, right, could be different for other people, but you're here to learn about yourself, to almost like absorb every part of your experience, learn everything it means to be you, right? And if someone's holding you back from learning more about yourself or experiencing your life to your fullest potential, whatever that may be, right? Then yes, let them go. And it's hard, it's painful, but that's an inevitable part of life. Eventually, these connections will die off anyways, whether one of you dies or someone gets divorced or whatever. You're going to have to sever every single connection that you've had from life till death, right? You're going to eventually, everything will fade away, right? It's just a matter of time of when, right? And so it's you're making the choice of, okay, am I going to be the person that severs this, or will fate do that for me? And I don't know if this is all making sense, but this is kind of how I feel about it. Because I think that we hold on to certain connections because, and I don't even think it's because we like them. I think it's because of a pride thing, or it's because of, my identity is attached to this person, right? My identity is attached to these groups of people. And that's valid to a certain degree, but I also think that identity in itself is a very malleable thing. Like it's a very it's hard to put into words, but identity is not really anything that you can touch, feel, hold. I think identity is whatever you are in a certain moment, right? I think that if you view yourself, you can view yourself kind of like as a series of frames, and you may have different ideals, values, and all these things, but it's just who you are in this present frame of the moment. That's your identity. That's all it is. And if you break it down even more, it's really just all your sensing, your awareness, right? What is around me right now? What are my feelings? All these things. And that's your awareness. That's who you are, right? And at least in my opinion. And so I think that, yeah, it's like, yes, your identity is always going to be changing. Your identity is never going to be the same. And so you can't have the same identity from one second to the next, right? It's always going to be different, whether it's microscopic or ginormous, you're always going to have a different identity. And so I think that you have to be okay with the fact that my identity is never fixed. My identity will always be on kind of a fluid state of being. And I think if you can understand that, then that also makes it easier to, move through social connections more fluidly, And I don't think that, it's good to just cut things off as soon as they get hard. That is not what I'm saying either. I think that's how you build community. You have to be a little bit annoyed with the people around you to, have a community around you, because no one's perfect, right? They're not you, right? Because I think we're more comfortable with ourselves than we think, but people are not going to hit every single bullet point of what you want. But also, there comes a degree, right? I think there's a threshold everyone has, right? If they're disrespecting you or they're not allowing you to express yourself fully, then yeah, move on to the next thing, right? But yeah, I think that's the fear of rejection thing. If you can get past that, which is hard, it's so hard to do that. I think that's one of the hardest things anybody can do. I think I've gotten lucky. Well, I don't know if it's lucky, but I had to deal with rejection pretty early, growing up gay, growing up in the South, and all these different types of factors, right? And just how I think and who I am and certain identities that I hold, there is, I think for me, like I had to understand, not everyone's gonna like me. Some people are gonna hate me for no valid reason, and it's a hard pill to swallow. I still deal with it. I still want people to like me. I'm still a person, but I've kind of come to grips with that a little bit. But I think honestly, put yourself in more situations where you can be rejected. Put yourself in situations where you're comfortable with someone saying no to you, someone saying, I don't want you, right? Because once you get comfortable with it, you also realize it's not that serious, right? It's not the end of the world if someone doesn't like me. Because again, I have billions and billions of options of people. There's a plethora of people to hang out with or spend time with, right? And so, yeah, be okay with someone saying no to you, right? Put yourself in situations where you can get told no. And that kind of goes with the fear of failure, but I think rejection, it's its own thing, right? Um, and so, yeah, get told no. Get told I don't like you. Get told all of these things because that's what's going to make you stronger in who you are because you'll realize that their no doesn't really change anything about me. I'm still here. I'm still in this present frame. I'm still perceiving and feeling everything that I am. And that's not going to change. I am who I am at this specific moment. And yes, someone's telling me something, but again, that's them. That's their own reality. That shouldn't affect you, right? That's noise, right? And I don't know. That's how I view it, you know? I think that if you can be okay with people telling you no, with people not liking you, with you being the only person on your journey, and if you're comfortable with that, then you'll be able to do anything, right? Because you have to be comfortable with just being alone, sitting alone in your room. And something that I would recommend, honestly, is like to literally find find a day. Not everyone has this. This is kind of like a privileged thing. But if you can, right, find a day and just sit by yourself, no phone, no entertainment, no anything, right? Like nothing. And go sit in nature and just sit and listen to the noises around you. Be comfortable with that. Be comfortable feeling this like terrible loneliness and sit there all day. And if you can do that, you can do anything. I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe if you can sit by yourself and not do anything, not stare at your phone, not talk to anybody, and just sit there and listen to the world around you, perceive the reality, feel the air on your skin, smell the pines of the forest, right? Hear the birds chirping, anything, right? Then you can be okay. You know what I mean? Um, so that's how I view that. And then I think the last one is fear of death. And this one obviously is like built into us biologically, right? If you're a living being, then you don't want to die. The whole point of living is to keep living. And right, we're literally fighting to live every single moment, whether it's the air that we're breathing constantly or the food that we're eating, we're constantly trying to live actively, whether it's subconsciously or whether it's unconsciously or consciously. We're trying to live. We're trying to keep ourselves alive. And so I think that fear of death, sometimes holds us back in a lot of ways. This one's a little bit more of an extreme one. But I think a lot of us catastrophize, right? I think a lot of us, we, I don't know, like we're like, I can't do this because I might die. Or I can't do this because, it's going to lead to a chain of events and then I'll die. You know what I mean? Um, or I don't want to leave this person because they could die tomorrow. Or these are terrible examples, but this fear of death thing is something we have to get comfortable with because it is an inevitable part of every person, right? Everyone dies, everything dies, and I can't control that. My friends can't control that. My mom can't control that. My dad can't control that. My dog can't control that. Nobody can control dying. That is actually the one equalizer I think all of us face. And we all die. And it's horrible and it's random and you never know what's going to happen. It could happen with a fucking piano dropping on your head, or you could have a terminally ill disease. Death is just something that comes. It's something that comes and sweeps you away and takes you from one world to another, right? And I think that if we view it not as this terrible, like everything's gone, everything's, you know, um, like it's this terrible thing that we have to be afraid of. Um, Rather than it's this thing that's just a part of our journey, right? And I think if you're a spiritual person, there's a little bit more solace in death, right? For those that believe in heaven or concepts of hell, it helps them grasp it easier. But I think that when we die, we kind of go into this like state of illusions, right? You die, and then your consciousness kind of goes out into a certain space, right? Your physical body, your physical form, your material world is left behind. And then when you die, you can go into a state of illusions, right? Of how you felt you lived your life, right? Do I feel like I lived my life in a way that was, virtuous? Was it good? Do I feel good about myself, right? Then I would probably go into illusions of heaven, illusions of I am, because your ego props you up to be, I am a good person, right? I am this amazing, better than sliced bread, right? You can go into that, but you can also go into, oh, I feel guilty about everything that I did. I didn't like how I treated people, or I didn't like how I did XYZ, this, that, or the other. And then you can go into illusions of hell, right? And because I feel guilty about who I am, but I think that ultimately death is kind of just this dissipation, because once you get past these illusions, right? And if you believe in reincarnation, I could go into that in a different time. But if you get past those illusion states, because I also do think that life in itself is an illusion, it's a dream that we're constantly creating. But if you go past that, then you kind of dissipate into this greater, larger space, this greater, larger, um, like almost consciousness, right? You kind of dissolve, right? You become everything that is everywhere, at every time. And I think that that's how I view it, right? I don't know the truth. And that's also a thing. You don't know anything. But I think that, ultimately death is kind of just this dissolution of our ego, right? This dissolution of what it means to be me. I'm no longer a frame. I'm no longer anything. I'm not feeling anything. I'm not seeing my own limbs. I'm not hearing. I'm not in this one specific experience. And so I think that's what death is. And just coming to realize, like, that's okay, right? It's just another way of existing, right? And I think that if you're okay with, I think fear of death is just a fear of change, right? It's a fear, that's what it really boils down to, because we're dying in every single moment. If you really think about it, every version of ourselves dies as we progress longer, right? And so just be okay with the idea of change, and then that will ultimately get you more comfortable with the idea of death. Now, I can't really say too much about grief, because that's the hardest thing a lot of people go through. And I think that, but even then, I think something that maybe give people solace is that, death is not necessarily like the complete, you know what I mean? Like, I guess people are afraid of endings. Maybe that's what it is. People are afraid of ending, right? But that's inevitable, right? Things end, but then they also get reborn as something else, right? You get turned into something else, you transform, right? And so if we think about death, let's say you're buried in the ground, worms are eating you entirely, and you're dissolving, right? But then you get turned into soil, you get turned into plants, and new life emerges from you, right? And so that can be the same thing, right, with an old past version of yourself dying, and then all of that happens, and then something new emerges. Be okay with things dying, because that also means things get to live, things get to start over, and if you're okay with that, then I think that, I don't know, I think that is kind of all you really need. And so yeah, fear is a built-in part of your experience, right? I think fear, it's a helpful tool, right? I think that sometimes, fear can be useful. You shouldn't, go up to a bear that has a baby cub, because I'm afraid of this, and then think, you know what I mean? It's okay to be afraid of things, because it's also okay to survive. But also, I think that fear, when it's limiting, that's when it can be harmful, when it's holding you back from pursuing the things that you really want. Sorry, I'm like really stuffed up right now. I'm not crying. I kind of have really bad allergies. It's crazy in Madrid right now. But yeah, I think do what makes you afraid. Do the things that give you fear, not in the necessarily sense of I'm eating a poison apple, or I'm, fighting a bear or something like that. But you know what the line is. I think all of us know what the line is. But, I guess, yeah, be comfortable with fear. Make fear your friend, and then you'll be able to live, I guess. You know what I mean? because I think fear is always with us, but we walk with it at a really long distance. We try to get away from it, but it always comes back. Walk hand in hand with fear, right? Be okay with that. Fear on your on your left hand, death on your right. Be okay with these. These are your friends. These are not things that you need to be afraid of. Well, I'm not afraid of, sorry. These are not things that you need to distance yourself from. Be comfortable with the idea of that, and then that's okay because these are natural parts of life. And that's how I view it. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I wanted to record this today because I think fear is a scary thing.